Let me describe someone to you. Her name is Jessica. She's 31 years old, works as a marketing coordinator in Charlotte, North Carolina, and makes exactly $75,000 a year. On paper, Jessica should be thriving. She should be maxing out her Roth IRA every January without thinking twice. She should be browsing Zillow for that starter home with a decent backyard. She should be booking that long weekend trip to Nashville she's been promising herself since last spring. Instead, Jessica is sitting in her 2016 Toyota Camry at a red light, staring at her phone screen, showing a checking account balance of $317. When her dentist called yesterday to schedule a root canal that insurance won't fully cover, she didn't feel annoyed about the inconvenience. She felt a genuine spike of panic that ruined her entire week. The estimate is $1,400, and her immediate thought wasn't whether to do the procedure, but which credit card still has room on it. And here's the part that really messes with her head. Jessica did everything right. She went to a public state university instead of the expensive private college her friends chose, specifically to save money. She picked a practical major in business administration. She landed a stable corporate job with benefits. She contributes 6% to her 401k to get the company match, just like HR recommended. She doesn't buy designer handbags or take expensive international vacations. She even uses a budgeting app that sends her cheerful notifications about her progress. So why does $75,000 a year feel like she's living paycheck to paycheck? Why does a salary that puts her in the top third of American earners feel like she's constantly choosing between paying down debt and handling basic life maintenance? Why does it feel like every time money hits her account, it evaporates before she can even think about building wealth? Here's the paradox that should genuinely disturb you. By every conventional financial metric, Jessica is winning. She has a college degree, a professional job, and an above-median income. But emotionally, mathematically, and practically, she feels like she's one minor emergency away from financial chaos. If any part of Jessica's story sounds uncomfortably familiar, you're not imagining things. In this video, I'm going to show you why your $75,000 salary is quietly performing like $22,000 of actual purchasing power, and why that represents a systemic trap, not a personal failure. My name is Barack, and I spend way too much time thinking about why people who followed all the rules are still getting financially destroyed by systems that claim to reward them. If you're someone who makes decent money but still feels broke, or if you've ever wondered why your parents seem to build wealth easier on smaller incomes, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps you out. Because today, we aren't talking about cutting back on coffee or finding a side hustle. We're talking about the contrarian reality that your gross salary is a mathematical illusion, and that there's an entire infrastructure designed to extract wealth from middle-class earners while convincing them they're the problem. Here's the thing about salary benchmarks. We've been conditioned to treat them like a guarantee of lifestyle quality. The conventional wisdom says that once you cross certain income thresholds, particularly that magical $75,000 mark, you should feel financially secure. You're earning more than 60% of American households. You should have breathing room for savings, emergencies, and occasional luxuries. It seems logical, right? If you're making significantly more than the median household income of around $51,000, basic math suggests you should be comfortable. Every career advice article, every HR presentation, every financial planning website quietly assumes that your gross salary translates directly into your quality of life and spending power. Except that's not what happened. What actually happened over the past 4 decades is that we created what I call the gross income illusion. Your salary number went up on paper, but the share of that salary you actually control plummeted due to the explosion of what economists call fixed mandatory expenses. The term for this structural trap is the middle class expense inflation, a concept most clearly articulated by Harvard bankruptcy expert Elizabeth Warren back in 2003 in her groundbreaking research on the two-income trap. Warren studied why bankruptcy rates were skyrocketing even as household incomes were rising across America. What she found was genuinely shocking. Families weren't going broke because they were buying more luxuries or living irresponsibly. They were going broke because non-negotiable fixed expenses had consumed an ever larger share of household income before families could make a single discretionary spending choice. Let that sink in. The problem isn't that you're bad with money or lack discipline. The problem is that before your paycheck even hits your account, massive portions of it are already committed to expenses you cannot avoid, cannot negotiate down, and cannot escape without losing your job or your housing. These aren't choices you're making, they're tolls you're paying for permission to exist in the modern economy. What Warren documented 20 years ago has only intensified. Today's $75,000 earner faces what I call the participation premium, the invisible tax you pay in rent, debt service, insurance, and mandatory benefits simply because you're responsible enough to pursue stability and follow conventional career advice. That's not personal failure. That's a systemic wealth extraction mechanism that converts your salary into institutional revenue streams, leaving you with the scraps while convincing you that you're the one feasting. Let me take you back to 1985, because understanding this history is crucial to seeing how dramatically the game has changed. In 1985, the median household income was approximately $27,000. That sounds impossibly small compared to today's $75,000, right? But you have to examine the entire economic ecosystem, not just the headline number. In 1985, the typical middle-class family had something we've completely lost: structural margin built into the system. A median-priced home cost about $76,000, which represented roughly 2.8 times the median household income. According to Federal Reserve historical data, families could realistically buy homes in their 20s and pay them off before retirement. They had employer-provided health insurance that covered entire families with minimal out-of-pocket costs and no deductibles that could bankrupt them. They had defined benefit pension plans that didn't require them to become amateur investment managers with their retirement security. And here's what most people don't realize: higher education was affordable enough that students could work summer jobs and graduate debt-free. The average annual tuition at public four-year universities was around $1,300. A student could cover an entire year's tuition with a part-time minimum wage job during the school year and full-time summer work. They had backup plans built into their family structures, often with one parent available to provide unpaid labor for childcare, elder care, and household management. Now fast forward to today. Median household income has risen to approximately $74,000, nearly triple the 1985 figure. Sounds like massive progress, right? But look at what happened to the foundational costs of middle-class life. That same median home now costs around $400,000 in many markets, representing 5.4 times median income instead of 2.8 times. Housing affordability has nearly doubled in difficulty. Healthcare costs have increased by over 400% since 1985, far outpacing both inflation and wage growth. Public university tuition has exploded to an average of over $10,000 annually at in-state schools, representing a 700% increase even after adjusting for inflation. Childcare, which was largely handled within families in 1985, now averages over $12,000 per year per child in many areas. Every single dollar of income growth from $27,000 to $75,000 got absorbed by the explosion in these non-negotiable survival costs. We're not making more money in real terms. We're just paying exponentially more for the basic infrastructure required to participate in modern economic life. Now you might be thinking, okay, costs have risen, but $75,000 is still substantial money. There should be something left over. But let me walk you through the forensic mathematics of what actually happens to that salary. And I want you to pay close attention because this is where the illusion becomes visible. Let's say you're Jessica, earning $75,000 annually in a mid-sized American city. We're going to track every dollar from gross pay to actual discretionary spending power. Let's focus on what happens to that $75,000 before you buy a single coffee or pay for a single night out. First comes what I call the government revenue share. Between federal income tax, state income tax where applicable, Social Security and Medicare taxes, you're looking at approximately 22% of your gross income disappearing immediately. That's $16,500 gone before you wake up on Monday morning. Your $75,000 becomes $58,500. But wait, there's more. Now comes the employment participation fee. To have this job, you need benefits. Your share of health insurance premiums for decent coverage runs about $300 monthly. Add dental and vision, and you're at $350 per month, or $4,200 annually. You also contribute to your 401k to get the company match because you're financially responsible. 6% of $75,000 is $4,500 annually. Your $58,500 drops to $49,800. And we're not done. You face what I call the proximity premium. You must live within reasonable commuting distance of your job to earn this money. The average rent for a modest one-bedroom apartment in cities with these salary levels runs $1,500 monthly. Over 12 months, that's $18,000. Add utilities, internet, and renter's insurance, and you're at $20,000 annually. Your $49,800 becomes $29,800. Next comes the credential tax. You likely carry student loan debt because you needed the degree to qualify for this $75,000 position. The average monthly payment on $28,000 of debt, which is typical for public university graduates, runs about $300 monthly or $3,600 annually. You're down to $26,200. Then there's the mobility tax. You need reliable transportation to maintain employment. Between a modest car payment, insurance, gas, and maintenance, the American Automobile Association calculates this at approximately $6,000 annually for a practical used vehicle. Your $26,200 becomes $20,200. Here's the kicker. We haven't included groceries, which run about $350 monthly for a single person eating responsibly, adding $4,200 annually. We haven't included a phone plan, essential subscriptions, basic clothing replacement, or any form of entertainment or social participation. We're already down to $16,000 before covering basic human needs beyond shelter and transportation. Let's add it up one final time. $75,000 minus $16,500 in taxes, minus $4,200 in health premiums, minus $4,500 in retirement contributions, minus $20,000 in housing, minus $3,600 in student loans, minus $6,000 in transportation, minus $4,200 in groceries equals $16,000. That's not a typo. Someone earning $75,000 annually, making responsible choices and living modestly, has approximately $16,000 of actual discretionary income. That's $1,333 per month to cover literally everything else: emergency savings, debt payoff, entertainment, gifts, travel, clothing, household items, medical copays, and any hope of building wealth. When you break this down to an hourly rate based on a standard 40-hour work week, your real purchasing power wage is approximately $7.70 per hour. Someone is trading their life energy, education, and professional skills for less than $8 an hour of actual financial flexibility after the system extracts its toll. And here's the psychological trap that makes this system particularly insidious. Because your pay stub displays that $75,000 figure, and because society constantly reinforces that this represents good money, you feel like you should be comfortable. This creates what behavioral economists call wealth perception dissonance. You make financial decisions based on your gross income while experiencing the consequences through your net reality. Every institution in your financial life uses that big number to determine what you can afford. The apartment complex sees $75,000 and approves you for rent that consumes 40% of your gross income rather than the traditional 25% of net income. The car dealership sees $75,000 and enthusiastically finances you a $30,000 vehicle. Credit card companies see $75,000 and extend $20,000 credit limits. They're all calculating based on money you never actually receive while you're trying to live on the much smaller amount that hits your checking account. This is where the trap snaps shut. Because you've committed to fixed expenses based on gross income calculations, you have zero flexibility when anything deviates from perfect. The middle-class family of 1985 had built-in shock absorbers, a stay-at-home spouse who could enter the workforce during crisis, home equity they could access, and pension security they couldn't accidentally raid during emergencies. Today's $75,000 earner has already burned every bit of financial flexibility just covering basic participation costs. There's no backup income source because both partners in a relationship typically need to work. There's no accessible home equity because you can't afford to buy. There's no pension safety net because those largely don't exist. You're optimized for perfection, which makes you incredibly fragile to any deviation from the plan. This creates what researchers call scarcity tunnel vision. When your financial margins are this tight, your brain actually functions differently. Studies show that financial stress measurably lowers cognitive function and decision-making ability. You become hyper-focused on immediate problems like that $1,400 dental bill, which blinds you to the structural issues systematically destroying your wealth-building capacity. You stop thinking in 5-year plans and start thinking in 5-day survival cycles. The previous generation had the luxury of financial slack that allowed them to recover from mediocre decisions. Today's middle-class earner is walking a financial tightrope without a safety net, all while society tells them they're living large. The system has successfully convinced you that earning $75,000 makes you wealthy, while simultaneously extracting that wealth through mandatory participation fees, leaving you with the anxiety of poverty despite the salary of prosperity. Now, you might be thinking, this sounds impossible to escape. If the system is engineered this way, what can one person actually do? That's exactly how the trap maintains itself. But here's the crucial mindset shift. You cannot win by playing the optimization game the way institutions designed it. You win by refusing to maximize what they say you can afford and instead maximizing your margin and flexibility. The alternative approach is what I call the margin liberation strategy. Instead of asking how much house can I afford based on my gross salary, you ask how little housing do I need to maintain 25% of my net income as true discretionary money. Instead of financing the nicest car the bank will approve, you drive the most reliable, paid-off vehicle you can find and bank the difference. Let me make this concrete with Jessica's numbers. If she moved from her $1,500 apartment to a $1,200 apartment, or found a responsible roommate to split costs, that's $300 to $750 monthly back in her control. If she sold her financed car and bought a $7,000 reliable used vehicle outright, she'd eliminate a $350 payment plus reduce insurance costs, recovering approximately $450 monthly. Those two structural changes alone create $750 to $1,200 of additional monthly margin. Remember our earlier calculation? Jessica had approximately $1,300 of discretionary income monthly. By making these two housing and transportation optimizations, she nearly doubles her financial flexibility to between $2,000 and $2,500 monthly. She hasn't received a raise, but she's given herself the equivalent of a $20,000 salary increase in actual purchasing power. This requires real sacrifice. It means living in a smaller space or with a roommate in your 30s. It means driving a car that won't impress anyone on a first date. It means opting out of the status signaling games your peers are playing with their pre-approved lifestyle upgrades. But within 18 to 24 months, that recovered margin transforms into an emergency fund that eliminates financial anxiety. Within 3 years, it becomes an investment portfolio. Within 5 years, it becomes the ability to say no to a toxic employer because you have runway. You're not buying granite countertops or luxury vehicles. You're buying optionality, flexibility, and genuine financial security that no salary number can provide if it's all spoken for before you receive it. I want to leave you with one final thought. This conversation about why your $75,000 salary performs like $22,000 isn't really about budgeting or income optimization. It's about agency versus dependency. It's about whether you control your money or your money controls you through pre-committed obligations that leave no room for choice. Our parents' and grandparents' generation had something we've systematically traded away: financial slack built into the system by default. Single-income families could survive and thrive. Pensions provided security without requiring financial expertise. Housing was affordable enough to pay off before retirement. College was cheap enough to avoid decades of debt. They had margin for mistakes, opportunities, and life changes. We traded that structural flexibility for what appeared to be upgrades to income optimization, investment account control, homeownership leverage, and credential accumulation. But each upgrade came with hidden costs that consumed the benefits while adding fragility. We optimized for maximum throughput rather than maximum resilience. The result is a generation of high earners who feel broke, not because they're financially irresponsible, but because they're financially over-optimized. Every dollar has a predetermined destination before it arrives, leaving no space for the unexpected opportunities or setbacks that define real life. But material possessions and status symbols aren't the actual goal. The real goal is what our earlier generations had naturally: the ability to absorb a financial shock without panic, to take a calculated career risk without catastrophe, to help family members without destroying your own stability. That's what genuine wealth provides, and it has very little to do with your gross salary and everything to do with the gap between what you earn and what you're forced to spend. You can hustle your way out of many problems, but you cannot hustle your way out of systemic traps you don't recognize. Now you know what the trap looks like. Now you know why you're not crazy for feeling financially stressed despite a good income. And now you know that the solution isn't earning more or budgeting harder on small expenses. It's refusing to spend up to your theoretical maximum and instead building the margin that creates real financial freedom. If this video helped you see your financial situation more clearly, make sure to subscribe and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.